Like, for example, if you're preparing for a very, very important meeting with your manager, director, and the last minute what you're going to face is that something is going to go wrong. Your laptop probably is not going to work. I've seen this happen with even PhD presentations. People are ready for the PhD presentation. Everything is done and dusted. They're about to present, then nothing works. Right? This is like the classic number one problem we face in the world of tech. So happy to see everyone back again. I think maybe there are a couple who probably did not come yesterday. So let's do a little bit of recap of some of the things we discussed yesterday, right? Just to jog everyone's memory in terms of what we discussed. Okay, let me ask a couple of questions just to get a sense of like who remembers what we discussed. Okay. Okay, so let's do a quick quiz. What exactly is a STAR? We talked about the STAR assessment framework. So anyone remembers what is STAR? Please feel free to unmute and answer my question. We talked about STAR framework. Anyone remembers what's the acronym for STAR?
Yes, situation, task, action, result.
Awesome. So, okay, that's a great answer, Himanshi. So let's move on to the second question, right? So what is the advantage of looking at a job description in advance of the internship process or the full-time job search process? Why should you look at a job description? There are two reasons I gave yesterday. Anyone remembers why you should do it? Hey guys, don't be so serious. Just try to answer, right? You're not going to lose any points here. Anyone remembers from yesterday's conversation? Okay, I'll give the answer myself. So the first thing you can do is you can actually fine tune your resume and make sure that you capture the words as described in the skills section of the JD. Put that as part of your resume, and your chances of your resume getting through the first stage of selection goes up dramatically. So the secret to actually making your resume clear the first round is to make sure that the language used in the resume is the same as the language being used in the job description. Anyone remember the second reason? You can actually predict the
Yes.
questions you will face. Yeah, go forward, please.
Yeah, you can see the skills. If you don't have any one of two skills of them, how will you predict or pretend the interviewer that you have those skills?
Awesome. That's a fantastic answer. In fact, you can do something called skill gap analysis, and we'll talk about it in today's conversation about how you can do the skill gap analysis. But there's also a larger point, which is that you can predict the questions you will face in the interview process by actually looking at the job description. Like, nobody will tell you this, but that's how it happens. So this is, I think, the hidden secret if you want to crack a job interview. Okay. So I think those are some good points. What about some of the numbers I talked to you yesterday? How long does a recruiter spend on reviewing a resume? Remember what I told you yesterday?
Some 5 seconds.
Yeah, exactly. 5 to 10 seconds, spot on. How many people apply for a job typically? There's one job posting. Any guesses as to the number of applicants? So even when you're doing a campus placements, the number is between 500 to 1,000. Okay, and if you're doing a job search outside campus placements, the numbers probably going to be well above 1,000 for every job opening. So what I'm trying to say is that you only got 5 seconds to impress a recruiter, and it's a very short window for you to make an impression. What are the chances of you getting through an interview process? When you get to an interview, what are the chances of getting selected? Any guesses?
30 to 40%.
Yeah, awesome. That's a very good answer. I would say more between 30 to 40%, but that's spot on. And what's the chances of getting through the resume screening process? It's probably around 1 to 2%. Okay. I mean, it's not 1 to 500 because I think you guys on the top schools and you also have good track record. So I think it's the number is slightly more for you folks. It's not 1 out of 500. It's probably more of like 1% or 2%. Okay. So I think those are some of the topics we discussed yesterday. We're now going to talk a little bit more about, we spent yesterday talking about the interview process. Today is going to be more about the resume shortlisting process and what should you look for when you write your resume. Again, what you think is important is not what the recruiter is going to think is important. So it's always very important for you to switch your frame of reference and look at it from a recruiter's perspective, from a company's perspective. Okay, so I think for some of the folks who have not met me yesterday, you're going to ask me, okay, well, who's this guy talking to me, right? Why is he talking all this? And so I've been working in the field of recruiting and HR for close to 15 years. I spent more than a decade working in Silicon Valley. I worked for a company like Cisco. So I used to be the global head for recruiting, both for India and the US. I used to lead campus recruiting. So this is one of the tasks I did. I also was HR business partner for thousands of employees. So I have pretty good sense of what companies look for. I've overseen the recruiting process in Samsung Electronics, General Mills, Cisco, a company called CDK Global. So I used to lead recruiting in all these organizations. So feel free to ask me questions. And again, this is just the beginning of a conversation. So if you have further follow-up questions, reach out to me on LinkedIn and you can always follow up on these discussions. Let's jump in. I'm going to begin by sharing my presentation I have for today. So, folks, I also work as adjunct faculty at IIT Palakkad. I came back to India last year, May of 2022. And since then, I've been trying to work with students to upskill and also work with placement officers to help them do a better job. Okay, so I'm actually teaching a course on getting ready for placements and trying to post that on the NPTEL platform so that all students can also access it whenever required. So I'll be teaching a course to within IIT Palakkad next semester. I also have a YouTube channel called Career Bolt. If you guys have heard of it, that's great. If not, I would love for you to check up some of the stuff I've posted there. It's always about how do you get ready for internship search? How do you get ready for jobs? Those are the two topics I always discuss. So today, this is what we're going to discuss, right? We're going to spend around half an hour talking about some of these things and then come back to you, ask you questions. By the way, if you have burning questions, feel free to stop me, ask me a question right away. Okay, so do not keep it till the end, but we'll definitely open up time in the end for Q&A. So we'll talk about some of the things you have to do in advance of doing your internship search and the actual job search process. How does it work? How can you create a good resume? How to create a fantastic resume? And how do you handle failure in the interview process? So these are some of the topics we'll be touching on. So most of you students are pretty much in your third year, beginning your third year. You will soon face the nightmare of both the internship search process and the full-time recruiting process. It's totally not easy. You will actually see a lot of craziness happen. Like, for example, day one, you'll have a lot of companies coming to campus. It's a craze to get into these companies. So it's very difficult not to get sucked into the peer pressure. All of your friends are getting placed. So what's happening to me? Where should I get placed? What is the compensation? I think a lot of you are going to ask those sort of questions. We'll talk about a framework to analyze some of these topics, but it's very important to understand that the actual job search doesn't begin the day the companies come for recruiting. It happens much earlier. So you have to pretty much begin preparing for internship and job search, maybe in your second year, but you have to begin in your third year. If you do not begin in your third year, there's a very low chance that you will actually get into your dream companies. So, for example, if some folks among you say that I absolutely want to get into a company like Texas Instruments or a company like Goldman Sachs or a company like McKinsey, you have to prep in advance. And we talked a little bit about some of the topics yesterday about how to prepare for case interviews, how to prepare for star interviews. All these things have been done months in advance of the actual internship search or job search process. Do not begin just like a couple of days earlier. Okay. Let me go to this topic. I think this is maybe one very common question I get. I've talked to maybe around 2,000 to 3,000 of the students across India. I've gone to their campuses. Probably this is one of the biggest questions I get. So what's the difference between a LinkedIn profile and what you write on your resume? Students, your thoughts. I would love to hear from you first before I give an answer. Folks, come on, take a shot.
LinkedIn is where we put on some interesting things of us.
Okay. And resume?
Like we have to fill up the pages.
Okay, fine. Any other thoughts? Rohan, do you have any thoughts?
No, sir.
Okay, so I'll give you the quick answer, right? In terms of a resume, typically has to be a one-page resume as much as possible. Try not to make it a two-page resume. So the number one feedback, for example, when I did my workshop at different IITs, like a month back, I was at IIT Roorkee, and a year back, I was in IIT Madras. The feedback I always was giving students is resume cannot be more than one page. The only exception to the rule is if you have maybe more than 10 years of work experience, yeah, maybe you can have two-page resumes. But for a job search resume, it's one page. So this is all expected from you. But the question you're going to ask is, I've done a lot more. Where do I put that information? So what I highly recommend is if all the things you've done in your life, all the great achievements you have, put that on your LinkedIn page. I hope all of you have a LinkedIn page, right? If not, please go forward and create a LinkedIn page as fast as possible. Customize your URL. There's an option for you to customize it. Do the customization and make sure that you put all the stuff you've done on your LinkedIn profile. Most recruiters, when they look at your resume page, they look for your LinkedIn profile right at the top. And once they find the LinkedIn profile, they click and go through it in a lot of detail. It's very common nowadays. And your resume has to be focused specifically on the company in terms of what are the job skills they require and what job skills do you have and how close a match is your job skill for the skills the company is looking for. So the job skill is basically the only thing you have to put on your resume. Everything else goes to your LinkedIn profile. So I think Himanshi asked this question earlier, or one of you asked a question around what do you gain by looking at some of the skills? And there's something called a skill mapping exercise which you should be doing, and I'm going to talk about how you can get it done. So let's take an example. Let's take like a person like Yashwant or Himanshi. Let's take Yashwant and say that Yashwant says that I'm targeting maybe 10 companies that I absolutely want to get in once I finish my undergrad. And how do I prep for these companies? So that's a question I get from Yashwant. So what I'm going to recommend to Yashwant is if you have 10 companies in mind, make sure that you customize your resume for each one of these 10 companies. So do not ever make the mistake of having one resume in terms of what you have done and sending it to all the companies which come to campus. That's a guarantee that you will not get into any company. What you have to instead do is look at the job description of these companies, identify the skills, and customize your resume for each company. A resume customized for one company can never be used for another company because it's pretty useless. And you will soon know the reason why. The job skills one company wants will not be the same as the job skills the other company wants. So an important way for you to look at the job search process is customize your resume for each company. Never use one resume to apply to all companies. It will only fail. And when I say all companies, I'm talking about different sectors like consulting, finance, tech jobs, CS jobs, data analytics. Obviously, you cannot use the same resume. And even, for example, if you're applying for computer science jobs, what Goldman Sachs looks for will be very different from what a company like Jane Street will look for. That'll be very different from what a company like Infosys will look for. So again, there's a difference between what each company wants. So maybe one homework you folks can do as you leave today's conversation is identify the top 10 companies you really want to apply for. So maybe in this case, Yashwant can choose the top 10 companies he wants to be in. It can be consulting, it can be finance, it can be data analytics company, whatever Yashwant wants to get in. I'm going to repeat what I talked about from yesterday. Go to the careers section of each company. Search for the job role you're applying for. There's always a search button out there under the careers page. Search for the job posting. For example, Yashwant is going to probably look for a software engineer at Goldman Sachs. Search for software engineer, look at what you find. You get a bunch of results. That result is called a job description. Download the job description, and under each job description, there is going to be something called skills. We'll talk about what that means, but this is the most important part of the actual job search process is identifying the skills as required by the company. We'll come back to skills. Yeah, sorry. Questions?
May I ask a question?
Yes.
So for us, it's not that we are applying to the company by our own. It's like there is a portal, there is a CDC portal, and
Yes.
we can upload a common resume, and with that resume only, we can apply to different company which are open to our campus.
Yes.
Like there is 3 options for resume, so we can have only 3 resume, and then by
Yes.
using these 3 resume, we can apply to all the companies. Like we
Okay.
cannot change resume or skills. The
Okay.
resume has been prepared much before the company has came.
Agreed. Himanshi, great point. So I guess what I'm trying to tell you is what companies are looking for, but there's limited flexibility. That's what you're telling me. So what I'm telling you is not
Yeah.
just about your campus selection process, right? I'm also giving you the big picture overview. If, for example, if you decide to search for jobs outside the campus recruitment process, maybe you're reaching out to companies by yourself, or if you finish graduation and you, for example, are looking for jobs on your own, right? Maybe after your first job or your second job after you graduate, what do companies look for? If there are companies not coming for internship in your campus, how do you reach out to them? So I think this is where we'll talk about what matters in a resume. And also, I mean, I understand what you're trying to say is that you have limited flexibility. And let's maybe talk a little bit about what you can do to get over the problem. And that is, you have to customize your resume for the company. At the same time, you only have limited flexibility. So we'll come back to how to resolve the problem. Okay. So just park it for the time being. I'll come back to this and answer this question. Okay. But I want you to get a general sense of what companies want, and we'll customize it later. We will get into a lot of detail around what each company is looking for, but let's also look at the big picture in terms of what you gain by doing a skill mapping exercise. So the first thing you will understand is, if you can list down the skills as required in the company, then the most important thing to ask yourself is, am I a fit for the company? So you don't need to wait till the company comes to your campus and then ask, will I get into that company? For example, if Himanshi says that I want to get into Texas Instruments, right? You don't need to wait till Texas Instrument comes to campus and then ask, okay, will I get in, not getting, apply and see. If they reject you, then you're like, okay, I didn't get in, right? You don't need to wait for that time. What you can do in advance is, if you follow what I said earlier, download the job description of, for example, engineer, semiconductor engineer at Texas Instruments. Under each job description, there'll be something called technical skills, there'll be something called people skills. List down all the technical skills, list down all the people skills. And there's this column I created. So there's a section called desired skills. So try to identify what level of expertise does the company want. Now, a level of expertise can be something like basic, intermediate, or advanced. Most companies are not looking for advanced skill set unless you have maybe a PhD degree. They're probably looking for either basic or intermediate. So you have to identify what is the skill set they're looking for, and also ask yourself, what skill set do I have? So this is called a skill mapping exercise. And again, it's not just for your first job search when you're doing an MS, MBA, full-time job search in the future. You have to do these things to understand how close a match are you for the company. So I guess one question you'll ask is, how do I identify the desired skill for the companies I want to get in, because I have no idea what the company wants? What I highly recommend is, you can do two things. One is that reach out to your friends or seniors working in these companies and have a conversation with them well in advance. Ask them, okay, what are some of these skills the company is looking for? What is the level of proficiency they want? So that way you can get a good sense of, is it a basic, intermediate, or advanced skill the company wants? Another way you can do it is reach out to professors working in your company. Many of them tend to have work experience, or some of them also work very closely with the industry. They can also help you understand what sort of skill the company wants. The third thing you can do is, if you don't have any contacts, you don't have any professors who know about these companies, use LinkedIn, reach out to people randomly in terms of people who are in high positions working in companies, and say, hey, can I have a conversation with you? Most people will not agree, but whoever agrees, go forward, have the conversation, ask them the same questions. What level of expertise do they want? Once you identify desired skills, and once you ask yourself what current skill you have, then the next plan of action is, how do you go from, for example, the technical skills, how do you go from basic to intermediate? How do you improve your knowledge? And the way you can do it is a bunch of things. One is that you can read books. That's a great way to do it. You can take courses within your college, within the, maybe you can take a course on the NPTEL platform, an IIT course, or you can work with your professors in terms of certain course. You can work on projects. You can work on internships. There's a bunch of ways by which you can enhance the skills. When it comes to people skills, maybe you can talk about your volunteer experience. Maybe some volunteer experience can get you the skill sets, maybe like a leadership work experience. You can talk about some positions of responsibilities. So there are multiple ways by which you can gain the skills, but you have to plan for it. None of these things will happen in a vacuum. You have to prepare for it in advance. Again, I'm repeating what I said. You can take courses, you can do internships, you can do projects. Remember that when you do projects, it's not just for the sake of saying that I have done a project. Choose difficult projects. Don't take easy projects. Likewise, when you're doing a BTech project or your MTech project, make sure that you do difficult projects. And the reason why I'm saying difficult projects is because you want to gain the technical skills which the company is looking for. If you take an easy project, you probably are not going to learn much. But then if you take a difficult course, maybe your grades will be lower, but you will learn a lot more. So you have to choose what is it you want to optimize. Be realistic. There are things you can achieve very quickly, maybe within 6 months, within 1 year. Maybe there are some things which take 2 to 3 years. So just be planful about what you can do or not do in the next 1 year, next 2 years, and so on. Okay. So these are things which will help you in the job search process. Okay. I've given you a lot of talk about what skill mapping means, but let's do a real-time exercise, right? So a couple of students asked me this question, okay, if I want to apply for Deloitte, what are the skills which Deloitte looks for? So what I did personally is I went to Deloitte, I went to the careers website, I pulled up this job description. And I begin to highlight some of the skills which I think is important. And you can see the way they phrased it, like if you look at a couple of job descriptions, you will get an automatic sense of what are the skills they want. In some places, the company will say explicitly it's problem-solving skills. This means that it is a skill they want. Sometimes they talk about working in a fast-paced environment. They sometimes talk about defining, analyzing, and managing requirements. Strong analytical and critical thinking skills. They already use the word skills. So you know that's a skill the company wants. So going back to what some of you mentioned to me earlier, the two reasons why identifying skills is going to be important. The first thing is that you want to use the same words as it is defined as skills on your resume. So when you write your resume, for example, let's say Yashwant is trying for Deloitte, he wants to get into Deloitte and the consulting team, he has to use words like problem solving, analytical skills, critical thinking skills on his resume. So this is the easy way for your resume to be spotted by a consulting company. Likewise, the second piece is that when you face an interview, for example, if Yashwant faces an interview at Deloitte, you can expect to get one question on, give me an example of a time in the past, the standard stereotypical star-related questions, which always begin with, give me an example of a time in the past when you had to show XYZ skill. So give me an example of a time in the past when you had to work in a fast-paced environment. Give me an example of a time in the past when you had to work in a collaborative culture. So why did they ask collaborative culture? Because that is what one of the skill is. That is what they're looking for. Give me an example of a time you had to solve a problem. What are they looking for? They're looking for this problem-solving skills. Give me an example of a time in the past when you had to show outside the box thinking. Why are they asking the question? Because that's defined in the job description. So quickly you can see that you can predict a lot of questions by looking at the job description. And since I worked as HR business partner, when actual interview calibrations happen, when all the interviewers get together to discuss candidates, the HR person is always part of the conversation. We always ask the managers to basically evaluate the student using the same question. So one question like, how did you evaluate the person in terms of outside the box thinking? Then we'll collect feedback from everyone and see how good the person is, right? So this is a way to bring all the team together, the interviewing team together in terms of a common criteria, and then deciding whether the student is a good fit or not. So likewise, I would say that look at Deloitte, you can identify a bunch of skills. Is maybe go forward and look at a company like McKinsey. So I went to the McKinsey careers website, looked at business analysts. So I think there are a bunch of students from IIT Madras and IIT Kharagpur here. So you guys may actually find this super interesting, right? So when you look at McKinsey, you sense that there are a couple of skills, again, they're looking for. They're looking for skills around solving ambiguous problems. They're looking for skills around synthesizing complex information into clear takeaways, working effectively with diverse teams, communicating effectively with audiences, capability to drive independent work streams, ability to break down and solve problems. So a lot of the questions you face in McKinsey, by the way, I've been through the interview process at McKinsey myself, and these are exactly the questions they ask you. So when they're asking you case-related questions, they're actually trying to not just understand whether you get to the answer, they're also trying to understand your way of thinking. They're trying to check, do you have the ability to break down a complex problem into smaller pieces? And when you answer, they're always evaluating you on the basis of these skills. They're trying to understand, can you break down complex information into clear takeaways? Can you come up with good recommendations? Can you work effectively with diverse teams? this skill is not easy to judge by using case interviews. So they will probably ask you a star interview saying, hey, a partner will call you and say, give me an example of a time when you had to work with diverse teams. How did you go around working with them? And what is the purpose of that question? Because they want to check how good are you with respect to this specific job skill. So again, you can see that anything you face in interview process is linked to the fact that it's part of the job description and they're trying to evaluate you on the basis of the job description. So when you're creating a resume for McKinsey, you basically want to hit on all these topics, right? So it has to be customized for these topics. Like if you have to talk about how, never use the word we on your resume, try to use the word I on your resume. When you're giving your interviews, again, do not use the word we, use the word I, because everyone wants to see how did you independently drive work streams. They don't want to understand what did you do as a team. They want to understand what did you do independently. But there are also places where they want you to work as a team. So again, based on what the company is looking for, you have to customize your answer. Let me pause here. Any questions so far based on what I'm talking about? So let's maybe go back to the question. I think Himanshi asked me this question around, someone else asked me the question around, okay, you cannot create 10 to 20 different resumes. You only have maybe 3 resumes you can put up on your campus website, right? Campus placement website. So what do you do? So what I would recommend personally is that identify which companies you absolutely want to work in. So do your homework, look at maybe the top 10 companies you're interested in and see which category do they fall under, which sector do they fall under. For assuming, like, for example, there are 10 companies, 3 of them fall into consulting, 3 of them fall into data analytics, 3 of them fall into software and coding. What I then recommend is you go to all the companies you're interested in, right? And look at the job descriptions and try to list down all the skills together. Combine all the skills together into one single place. Look for what are the common themes the company wants. And whatever is common theme, identify those common themes and make sure that the common themes get reflected back on your resume. So you basically end up creating one resume for consulting, one resume for data analytics, and one resume for software engineering or software development. But at the same time, you're customizing your resume for what the company wants. So if you're talking about, say, software engineering, right? There are a lot of different directions you can get into. Being a full stack engineer, you can get into being a backend engineer. You may want to work in AI, ML. So again, ask yourself, where is your interest? Forget what company is coming to campus. Ask yourself, where is your interest? And one of the ways by which you can judge your interest is that skill mapping exercise we talked about earlier. Do the skill mapping and ask yourself, am I a good fit for the AI, ML companies? If you're finding that you're not a good fit, maybe you're going to be a good fit for being a back-end engineer or a full stack engineer, right? So once there's a good match between your skills and what the company wants, target those jobs, focus on those jobs and make sure that the expectations of that company is listed on your resume. So by doing this work, you'll basically come to like 3 standard resumes where you've looked at maybe 10 to 20 companies, identified the skills and incorporated that as part of your resume. And I feel that if you do this homework, you stand a much better chance of getting through each company. Ideally, you will have to customize for each company, but maybe that's not possible sometimes. In that case, at least customize it for the sector, if not for the company. Does it answer your question? In terms of how to customize your resumes, is that helpful?
Yes.
Okay, great.
Yes.
Okay, so I'm going to talk about a typical resume you'll use once you are in the job market. This doesn't reflect that you're using a different resume when you're doing the campus recruiting process is all different. You have an institute-based resume, so you have to follow institute format, right? There's no getting around it. So through this exercise, I'm going to talk a little bit about what is a big picture. Use that big picture and try to take away what you want to do during your job search process. Okay, so the big picture is what we are going to discuss today. How you customize your institute resume is up to you. When you're inside a college or institute, you have to work within the rules of the institute. So you have to follow the institute format as much as possible. Okay, so ideally, when I look at a resume, right, when you go to the open job market, if you're looking for off-campus jobs, what we look for is We look at I have maybe 10 seconds I'm going to spend on a resume. So I'll tell you what are the things I'm looking for. Number one, I'm looking for the name at the top, right? It should be clearly visible. That's what I want. Second thing I'm looking for is all the contact details, like their phone number, their email ID, their LinkedIn ID, their address. Like these are the things I'm looking for. And whether you're doing an MS program, MBA program, you're studying in IIMs, go do an MBA from the US, the same rules apply wherever you go. Try to list down your objective. Again, if it's not allowed in institute format, that's fine. But typically I look for an objective because it reveals two things to me. One is, what does the student want? Is the student looking for a full-time job? Is the student looking for an internship? Are they looking for a co-op? I have no idea. I want to hear from the student what they want. So maybe that helps. The second thing, what will help me is, okay, what is the skill that the student brings to the table? So this student has listed 3 skills. And the critical thing is, does the skill which the student bring to the table match what I am looking for in my job description? So for example, Rohan can say that I am awesome in problem solving, quantitative analysis, and domain knowledge. But maybe the company he's shooting for, it could be, for example, Mahindra and Mahindra, right? They don't care about these things. So Rohan may be an excellent student, may have fantastic skills, but if the skills Rohan has to offer doesn't match what Mahindra and Mahindra is looking for, he will not get through the first stage of the resume shortlisting process. So you have to custom, in the sense like you have to write down the stuff what the company is looking for, right? So ideally, Rohan should do some pre-work in terms of trying to understand what do manufacturing companies like Mahindra and Mahindra, Godrej, or Tata Motors, what do they look for? And customize his resume according to the job. I'm looking for things like if you have a good CGPA, which is like 8.5 and above, I think is good. Even 8 and above is good. Below that, it's up to you whether you want to put it on your resume or not. It helps to have a good GPA for sure. And whatever courses you have taken, especially for consulting jobs, for finance jobs, for computer science jobs, your understanding of coursework is also very important. For data analytics jobs, again, important. So if you've done some good coursework, it helps. There are a bunch of students in this group who are from non-computer science branches, and you're also targeting for the jobs in computer science and data analytics. For me, if you're a non-computer science student targeting CS jobs, I want to know what have you done in computer science to target those jobs. So it can be courses you've taken from within your college. It can be Coursera classes, online classes, but list down the courses you've taken. That helps me understand that you're a serious candidate applying for jobs in computer science. Okay, so you list down some of these things there. When you talk about your industrial experience, I think this is very, very important for companies because I don't want to, like if I'm looking for a full-time hire, I don't want to be a company which is going to experiment with somebody. For example, let's again pick on Rohan. Rohan, no offense to you, but I'm just going to pick on you for the time being. That I don't want Rohan to come to my company and experiment for the first time in his career if he's cut out for a job in computer science. I don't want that. I want a person who's already proven themselves in computer science. So when I read the language of the resume, I get a very good sense of this. Does this person understand what computer science is? Does he understand the job skills? Has he made an impact in the workplace? So I'm already asking these questions. So ideally, when you begin writing a resume, never use the word I did. If you begin with the word I did, I know that you are a novice, you have no idea how to write a resume. High chance that you get rejected right away. Always begin with something called action verb. You always begin with a powerful verb like generated, led, spearheaded. Those are the kind of words you got to be using. So you talk about if you built and generated reports to track engagement, right? So this is the work being done by data analyst folks or business analyst folks. You also add a number to it. This is called a metric. So remember yesterday we talked about when you give a star answer, you always close with the result, which is also a metric. The same way you also introduce a metric into every line or bullet point you put on your resume. Never have a resume bullet point without a metric. So whenever I give this feedback to anyone, right, first thing they come to me is it's impossible. There are a lot of work I've done which cannot have a metric. Okay, so my answer to that is think hard. I've seen probably tens of thousands of resumes so far, and the best resumes are always those bullet points which have a metric linked to it. So the metric can be something like efficiency improvement. It can be productivity improvement. In software, it can be something like the number of maybe the number of bugs you resolved. It could be the amount of codes which were created efficiently, right? You probably solved some created efficient code and has some metrics to measure it. Maybe it could be user engagement data. Maybe it could be the number of people who looked at that app. There's just a lot of metrics you can use. Think hard. If any, I've also probably worked with students like you. Have gone to different institutes and given direct feedback to students. By the way, guys, if any one of you have a resume, you want to discuss your resume with me after the end of this session, I'm happy to open it up. Okay, so feel free to share your resume. I'm happy to give you feedback if you have your resume with you. But every bullet point needs to have a metric at the end of the day. Okay. If you develop, say, a Google Analytics dashboard, right, you have to attach a metric to it. So this resume is not perfect because it talks about social media followers without giving numbers. Let's look at some of the other work. So talks about deploying a softmax regression model. So this is a very technical term. Looking at this, I can understand that this person has done some good work. They talk about a metric attached to it saying decrease wastage by 10%, cost savings of 15 lakhs. So there has to be a metric to a bullet point. If you think very hard and you say that I cannot identify a metric, then maybe don't put it as a bullet point. You will appear very powerful if you attach a number to each one of these bullet points. So this is all about work experience. I've heard some MTech students come to me and say that they don't have the chance to have done an internship in industry during the end of the first year. So what should they do? What I highly recommend to them is it is not always about industrial work experience, but even if you do some research experience as part of your coursework, or if you do some projects with professors, put it there. It's very helpful. In this case, right, I mean, I pulled up an example of like somebody working with a professor, did some analysis work, talked about reducing processing cycle times, talked about reducing overall process costs. So again, add metrics. This is again not a perfect metric because there's no number attached to it, but you have to add some numbers. So if you present it from this framework, it can look very good. Now, when it comes to people skills, you can also do other things like you can add your volunteer experience. And again, you do the same thing, right? You led a team, you supervised a project for 200 low-income families. This is a big deal. You may think volunteer work is all nonsense. No, it's not true. Volunteer work can mean a lot if framed the right way. In this case, if you led a team of 10 members, you improve the efficiency of the existing process by 20%. Even a recruiter from BCG or McKinsey will take this seriously. They would like to know more because they'd be curious to see what did you do during this volunteer work to improve your efficiency by 20%. So again, these are easy ways by which you can get more attention to your resume. I would highly recommend that you not spend too much time on your hobbies and other things, because I'm mainly looking to see, are you a match for my job description? Are you a match for the skills as defined in the job description? So you can go off on a tangent. You can talk about climbing Mount Everest, Mount Kilimanjaro and all that. That's all great, but it really doesn't mean much. Again, I know there are exceptions like companies like consulting companies where if you have got a very good position of responsibility, it definitely helps you in the internship search process or job search process. But ideally, outside the consulting world, it may not really account to much. Okay. So these are examples of action verbs. I'm going to share these slides with everyone. So Ms. Rajeshwari is going to share the slides with you as we finish this session. But try to, when you have a resume in front of you, try to change your resume by using these words as defined here. This will make your resume look a lot more powerful. It will also make it look as if you've done lots and lots of work. So it's a shortcut to creating an impressive resume. Okay, let me maybe pivot a little bit. We've probably got like 10, 15 minutes. Talk about, again, it's a checklist of things which HR looks for. And for me, I don't even need to read these things because this is automatically flowing in my mind when I look at a resume. First thing first, spelling mistake, grammatical errors. No way. You cannot have a spelling error on your resume. Right? Like if you have a spelling error, even I've seen this even happen to very senior people, like people applying for jobs like a senior director, VP, they tend to have mistakes. Like even an entry-level fresher cannot have these mistakes, let alone senior people. So please do a bunch of things. Use Microsoft Word to do a spell check. Number one thing you have to be doing. The number two thing you can do is Grammarly. Have you guys heard of the Grammarly app? There's an option to actually do a check. They'll give you a lot of errors and they flag errors to you. So use Grammarly to spot errors. That's the point number two. Point number three is there's also mistakes which an automated program like Word or Grammarly cannot catch. So go to some person like a professor or somebody who is like an English language teacher in your neighborhood. Talk to them, maybe it's your friend circle, maybe your neighbor, right? Talk to them, get some feedback. I think it's very important for somebody to read your resume and give you feedback in terms of does it make sense or not. Please make sure that your email is listed at the top of the resume, your phone number, the details are mentioned. Do not have unprofessional email ID. So I've seen examples of like crazycat@hotmail.com or like a coolcat at something, right, at ymail.com. So there are two reasons why it's bad. Firstly, use your name. Don't use crazy cat, cool cat. This is not a way to have an email ID. Like you want to look professional, so don't be unprofessional. Second thing I'm asking is, hey man, in this world you should be using Gmail. You should not be using like Ymail or Proton Mail and all that, right? So again, that's if you're using Proton Mail, I'm a little confused. I'm like, you're probably caught in a time warp. 20 years back, it was okay to use Proton Mail, but maybe not now. So again, just be aware of the impression you're sending about yourself to the world outside. Never disclose things like your age, gender, totally unnecessary. In the US, these are all protected fields, which means that no company should be asking these questions. And if they ask the question, you can, the person being interviewed, right, can take you to court. They can file a court case. Since many of the companies in India are also from the US, the US-based MNCs, the same tradition lingers that they do not typically expect any sort of picture, age, gender, personal information, and so on. Don't use the word I on your resume. We talked about it. Do not use passive language. Try to always say there's something called action. When you're talking about a sentence, instead of using passive tense, you can use active tense, and just do some homework in terms of what I'm trying to talk about. Do some homework in terms of how you want to present yourself. Typically, Indians tend to use passive tense when we talk. And when you switch to a resume, it's better to use active tense. Okay, so just reorganize your resume on this format. Make it easy to skim. So if I, for example, see something like too many fonts, I don't like it. I basically want the resume to have minimal fonts in terms of you want to use one or two formats and that's it. You want to have maybe not more than 2 different fonts on your resume. Try to stick to as minimum fonts as possible and make sure that the left-hand side, right-hand side, they're all aligned together. So easy to read and nothing is out of place. Like when I look at a resume, right, the first thing is channeled is some word is not aligned, like the additional space between 2 words. My mind just grabs it. I'm looking for a perfect resume without mistakes. So make sure that you proofread it as much as possible. Many a times I've seen computer science students use LaTeX to create the resumes. It looks wonderful. So if you guys have the ability to use LaTeX, do use it because the resumes absolutely look fantastic, especially when you're doing your off-campus recruiting. There's no need to list your references, not required. You use the references when you're applying for higher studies, when you're trying to do your MS or PhD abroad. You don't need to list references on your job resume. We talked about using facts and figures. We talked about a resume being ready in 5 to 10 seconds. Make it easy to read. It shows up very clearly if you've done your homework because your resume will look easy and it look well prepped. Okay. Use consistent spacing, bold, italics. So don't do bold in one place, italics in one place, and so on. So use the same consistent format throughout. If there is space between 2 paragraphs, keep it consistent throughout. Don't make mistakes there. Try not to have abbreviations on your resume. For example, if you say you are a POC on your resume, people wonder what the hell does POC mean? It could mean point of contact, right? But you have to mention what it means. If you use something like SLA on your resume, what the hell does SLA mean, right? I mean, you have to define what that means on your resume. If you do not define, the reader is not going to understand. Remember that the person going through your resume is probably a non-technical person. Is going to be a non-engineer. Most recruiters belong to the world of HR. They don't belong to the world of engineering or technology. So they don't really have too much work experience and they are also not engineers. So make it easy for them, make their life easier and make them your friend by listing it down properly. Also, when you list your work experience, begin with the latest information at the top and then work downwards. So that's the best way to do it. And don't go back to your school days. I highly prefer that students only talk about what they did after they joined their undergrad program. So for example, whenever I see someone who's written like, I got so-and-so rank in AIEEE exam, or I got so-and-so rank in IIT exam, I got the first place in some NTSE's like school selection exam, or I was a topper in another exam. I don't care what you did in your school. I only care about what you did in your college. Okay, so that's some easy ways by which you can create a good resume. This is probably among the last couple of slides. One is that when you face interviews, when you're writing your resumes and applying for jobs, you will face a lot of failures. So keep practicing. Try to ask for feedback as much as possible. So ask for feedback, and when you get feedback, act on feedback. You don't need to wait till you meet a company to ask for feedback. You can do it well in advance. Share your resume with the seniors. Ask them to ask you questions, start questions, and practice answering some of the questions. Get feedback from your professors, share it with them. When you are doing your internship, create your resume, share it with your internship manager, ask them for their feedback. Try to network with people working in your dream companies, share your resume with them and ask for feedback. These are all things you have to be doing. Okay? And get feedback and develop a thick skin. Don't take everything too seriously. Just understand that you're just beginning your career, and people make mistakes all the time. People with 20, 30 years of work experience also make a lot of mistakes. So it's okay for you to make mistakes early on. Focus on skill development. In terms of, we talked about how to do skill mapping, but don't focus on compensation early on in your career. That's my advice I would strongly want to give everyone, is that all of you will make a ton of money within the next 10, 20 years, because the Indian economy is going to be much, much better. There are going to be lots and lots of job opportunities in India. There are going to be highly paid jobs in India. So your life will always only get better with time. So don't choose jobs just because they pay you well, because you don't want to get burnt out. You want to have the energy to build the skills for the future. So plan for a career like 5 years down the line, what you're going to be doing, 10 years down the line, what you're going to be doing. Don't always focus on what is my immediate next job. Sometimes you may want to take up a job which pays less, but you can learn a lot. And using that learning, after maybe 1 or 2 years, you can then apply for your dream company and easily get in, because companies always trust the skills you gain, and they really want people with highly trained people with the right skill set. That's important for them. They don't care what your background is. Many people, what happens is they get into top companies and stop learning. They forget that the purpose of life is actually to learn every single day. And if you're in a position where you get into Goldman Sachs and you're like, okay, my life is set, I don't need to learn anything more in my future, that's the beginning of your downfall, because you begin here, your friends are beginning here, right? They don't get into Goldman Sachs, but you are here, you get gotten into the best company. The next year, your skill is going to drop because you're not doing anything to improve your skill set, but your friends are learning, so their skills improve. So within 3 years, both of you are the same skill set. Within the next 5 years, they're probably above you, right? So you began from here, you went down because you're not improving your skill sets, but your friends who are more enthusiastic are probably on their way up. So you don't want to be a person who doesn't learn every single day. Focus on picking up skills every single day. Don't be guided too much by what your friends are doing. Ask yourself, what is it you want to do in your careers? Let me pause here, take up questions and come back to this slide in the end. Questions from people as you listen to me.
Sir, whether the courses which you do as electives really matters.
Yashwant, I think it's a complex answer, because you have to ask yourself, why are you doing that elective, right? Is it to get a good grade? Do you want to improve your GPA, or do you want to learn? So I would personally recommend, yeah, please go for it.
Yeah, like both increasing my GPA and learning both
Yeah.
as well. Like I'm
Okay.
concentrating on both.
That's good. That's good. So I think what you should not be doing is taking super easy courses, right, where you can actually get a very high grade without learning anything. Right? Don't do that. Don't make the mistake. I've seen people make the mistake in the undergrad, the MS programs, MBA programs. Most companies don't care for a grade point average beyond a point. Like if you are 8 plus, most companies should be happy with like 80% or 8 plus, right? It should be enough for most companies. There are a few companies which are very selective. Like I think as part of the Samsung Electronics team, when I came to IITs, I used to insist on a GPA of 9 and above in the computer science discipline. But that's among the few exceptions. Most people are not too focused on the grades. So I would say that focus on learning, that's important. And also ask yourself, once you do the skill gap analysis, why am I taking this elective? What sort of skills do I want to gain? Using the skills, what sort of companies can I target? What sort of sectors can I target? And only you can answer that question, Yashwant. And if, for example, you're targeting a computer science career, right, there are a specific set of skill sets you're going to gain based on the skill gap analysis. So you do that analysis first and then ask yourself, will I gain this skill to get into this company by taking up this course? And if you say that, if the answer is yes, that can be a good indicator that maybe that elective is right for you. Does it help, Yashwant? Do you have any follow-up questions?
No, sir.
Okay, good.
Thank you, sir.
Yeah. Other questions from other folks?
So like also the placement team will be submitting our grade card as well, right? To the companies.
Yes.
Okay.
So Yashwant, I'll tell
Like
you, unfortunately, the reason why grades are playing an important role. It's a very insidious scenario. The reason why it's happening is because there are too many applicants, and companies want to find an easy way to shortlist to a sizable and manageable number. For example, right, when I went to IIT Roorkee a month back, I went there and did a 2-day workshop there. I heard from American Express that they came to campus, 800 students applied, and they ended up selecting one student. You know, the reason why they use grades is because they want to find a random reason to eliminate students and bring the group of 800 applicants to a more sizable number, like maybe 20 to 30. Then they'll work on interviewing maybe 20 to 30 applicants and bring it down to maybe the top 3, top 4, and then further distill it down to the top 2, top 3, and so on. So every recruiter knows that grades is a very imperfect way of estimating the skills of students. It's a very foolish way to estimate the skills of students, because ideally, there's a lot of research which also says that grades have little connection with actual workplace performance. But in spite of that, companies are still using it because they feel that that's an objective way to filter people. Again, since there's no better way to filter people, it continues to be used. So it's a little sad in terms of a reflection on how the recruiting process works.
thanks.
Yeah, Yashwant. So again, like I said, if you have an okay, like a good GPA of 8 and above, I think it's fair enough. Don't focus too much on grades, focus more on what you learn, because skills are end of the day more important. Once you finish your undergraduation, you go to the world outside, to the job market outside, you work for 1 year, 2 years, and so on, right? Nobody will ask you your grades anymore. It's all about the skills you have, your communication skills, your people skills, your technical skills, and so on. Nobody will be concerned about grades once you finish college. Yes, that's another reason why you should not be focused on the grade aspect. Maybe I'll take 1 or 2 more questions if there is someone asking questions, or I'll then jump to this slide, which I also want to talk about.
Scholars, you can also type your questions on the
Yeah,
chat
please.
box.
You type it in the chat box.
So
So I know,
Jishmita,
I know that you guys have done a different workshop with another person in JTF earlier. So is this helpful? Is it different? I also want to hear your thoughts. Any volunteers to talk about how different it is?
yeah, some of you who sat separately with Mr. Balaji to edit your resumes, I think should share your thoughts. I remember Sri Likita, Dikshant Bansal doing that.
So let's come back to the earlier question. Does anyone want to get a resume review today? Even if you guys want to do it later, I'm fine. Maybe we can discuss with the FFE team, maybe create a separate like half an hour later so that I can give you feedback on your resume.
Yeah, we can have a separate call and give some time slots to each student, and then they can share screen and
So what Balaji talked was maybe from a technical perspective, what they're looking for, but you can already see from what I told you that it's not just about a technical competence. You also undergo a lot of HR shortlisting rounds. So maybe I can give you some tips on how to get through the HR process. Okay, Ms. Rajeshwari, let me maybe talk a little bit about this slide. I think this is also a little bit important to students because it will help them understand the big picture behind careers.
Sure, Mr. Vinod.
Be thoughtful about what jobs you're targeting. So when I went to IIT Roorkee, every single student was saying that they want to be in product management. And I thought it's a little bizarre because there's just one company coming to campus. It ended up selecting one student. How can, like, I talked to 300 students and almost like 250 of them wanted to be in product management. So I'm like, firstly, there are not so many jobs in product management, and there are also not these companies coming to your campus. So be realistic about which company is coming to campus. So understand the odds of getting into each company. Some companies are necessarily very selective, like investment banking, the top tier consulting companies, the MBB companies, Bain, BCG, or if you're talking about product management, these jobs are very difficult to get because they can be as selective as they want. Anytime they put out a resume, they'll have 10,000 applicants, right? So it's never a problem for them to get people. But if you're looking at, say, a traditional job in, say, civil engineering in Larsen and Toubro, or if you're looking at a job in, say, Tata Motors, right, in manufacturing, there are not going to be too many applicants from the top engineering school. So understand the odds of getting in and then decide, do those jobs make sense for you? Getting your first job is probably always going to be the toughest for anybody in their career. Everybody goes through this. When you don't have work experience, it's so difficult to finalize your job and get selected. So be ready for that fight. The fight is probably going to be the biggest fight in your career. It will only get easier with time. Whichever path you take, 10 years later, 20 years later, when you look back, you'll always say that I did the right thing, because humans have a tendency to rationalize their decisions in life. So relax, whatever decision you make, in the future, you will think that is the right decision. So be thoughtful about what you do right now, but do not regret your decisions, because at the end of the day, it will all pan out correctly. There is this ISRO scientist, I'm not sure if you've heard about them, but if you look at the Project Chandrayaan, and if you look at the profiles of these people, they're the best in the world. They've even beat NASA in terms of doing a live landing on the south pole of the moon, which no country has ever done so far. I think the only country which has done it is China, which did 2 crash landings in the last 5 years. US has not even done any landing, not even a crash landing on the south pole of the moon. So India is the first country to do it. And if you look at the profiles of these people, they're not necessarily the brightest people when they finish their undergrad. They're not from the greatest of colleges, but it doesn't matter. In the long term, if you invest in your career, like most of these ISRO scientists have gone on for a PhD in their 30s, early 30s, mid 30s, they've gone on for the PhDs and finished their PhD from IISc, IIT Madras, IIT Bombay, between the ages of 35 to 40. So it doesn't matter where you begin. It's all about like how much interest you have in your career. And if you keep following your interest, you'll be the best in the world. It doesn't matter what your skills are as you in the first year of your working life. Life is always about a long term. It's always about running a marathon. It's not about finishing a 100-meter race. So what I want to say through this is, don't run a marathon like you're running a 100-meter race. So don't run full speed early on, because that's no way that you will finish a marathon. We talked about the fact that compensation is also not the greatest. I mean, it's an important factor, but do not use it as the only factor to shortlist companies. Use skills and what you're going to gain by working in that company. I think that's a much better way to look at jobs. Folks, I close my conversation here. I'm not going to stop sharing.